Hey everyone, Zach Mason here. Welcome back to the channel. Sorry to be gone so long. Like a lot of you, I've been traveling, busy with the holidays, with life. Also had a sickness I was battling for a little bit. And I've also been watching events, trying to figure out what is going on. Things did not unravel exactly as I thought they probably would after the election. At this time, it does seem like we're on a path where Trump is going to be peacefully inaugurated. And that could happen. I don't know. It is a bit confusing given everything that we've heard and learned over the years with what God seems to have been communicating. In some respects, it seems like we're in the eye of a storm here in the United States, with the exception of the drones and a few other stories like that. But if you pay close attention, there are little hints here and there that things are not right, not okay. And if you get to news outside the United States, which is mainly what we're going to talk about today in this video, the world is not marching towards peace and safety. The world is not marching towards peace. Things are disintegrating outside of our borders as far as slouching towards World War III, slipping into World War III. Every day the news seems to push us a little closer to that, with things escalating here and there. But we will keep watching, and we'll let you know as soon as I have a better... I don't like to speak until I have a pretty good idea about something, or I feel very confident about something. Nevertheless, there is something that I'm fairly confident about, that I'm actually happy to report that I got something right 10 years ago that I predicted purely from Scripture. I'm going to read to you from my book, Revelation Unfolding, on page 143. Now, if you've read my book, you know that I make a building off of what authors like Joel Richardson and a lot of others have, the work they've done in analyzing prophecy and demonstrating that the Antichrist empire is most likely going to be an Islamic caliphate. And that is really the framework that makes the most sense in Scripture. If you still subscribe to the Catholic Church or the revived Roman Empire or all of these things, then I'm going to talk. I've already done videos on those, but in the next video I'm going to talk a little more about why those are not no longer viewed as valid prophetic frameworks, how we know that those are not accurate. But building off of that, in my book, Revelation Unfolding, I agreed with Joel Richardson and said, okay, I believe if we accept that the revived Islamic Caliphate, revived Ottoman Empire will be the Antichrist empire, then let's look at who's leading Turkey now, and that is President Erdogan, Tayyip Erdogan. And I made a very strong case based on many things, including him being the true originator of the Islamic State of ISIS, the true creator and founder of that. His name adding up to 666. There's a lot of in Greek. There's a lot of reasons why I thought Erdogan was a very good candidate for the Antichrist. And I'm now really looking at his son. I believe his son actually is the best candidate, Bilal. In the next video, I'm going to talk a lot more about that evidence and why. However, everything I thought applied to the father and was reasons the father could be, even more so applies to the son. So there's really not an issue. But nevertheless, before I knew the son was in the picture, and I was looking at the father 10 years ago when I wrote my book, Revelation Unfolding, this is what I said. I said on page 143, if Erdogan is the Antichrist, then he must conquer 3 nations. Now, why do I say that? Because in Daniel 7, there is a terrible beast that is different, according to verse 7. It says this beast is different from all beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. It tramples, it destroys, rips to pieces. This is not a description of the Roman Empire. This is a description of Islam, the Islamic Caliphate that came after Rome. And if you're not understanding how that could apply to Daniel 2 with the statue, I'll talk about that in another video. Regardless, in verse 8, we know that the 10 horns, the beast, the final beast empire has 10 horns, which other places in Scripture tell us these are the final 10 kings that rule with the Antichrist for 1 hour, for a brief period of time. In verse 8 it says, I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them. So this is an 11th horn, a small one, coming up among the 10, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. Okay, this is the Antichrist. In fact, that's the best and most accurate title for him. We really, if we want to be accurate, especially if you're talking to God, if you ask God who is the Antichrist, he's free to show you a lot of different people. In fact, a lot of modern prophets have gotten confused because they've asked God, who is the Antichrist, and he'll show them a picture of Barack Obama for one, or some others, and those are an Antichrist. They have the Antichrist spirit. Barack Obama is going to be essentially the American Antichrist, but he's not what most of us mean by the Antichrist. Barack Obama doesn't qualify. He cannot be the global Antichrist. He doesn't meet the biblical criteria. There's other verses that he can't fulfill, genetically speaking, much less in his role. So the correct title for the one that you mean when you think of Antichrist, what we really should be saying is the little horn of Daniel. The little horn of Daniel 7. That's who we're all meaning. And by the way, I think it's kind of funny that God, the Antichrist's biggest sin is pride. That's the enemy's big sin, right? And so what does God do? He calls him a little horn next to these other 10 horns, bigger horns that are ruling alongside him. It's like it's a little dig God is doing. So this little horn came up among them, speaking pompous words. Nevertheless, the little horn of Daniel, the Antichrist, one we think of as the Antichrist, is going to be involved in reviving the Islamic Caliphate, and he's going to rip 3 kings out by the roots before him. And combining that passage with Psalm 83, which is a prophetic psalm about a future war against Israel, I concluded that there were certain nations that seemed to be the most likely candidates to be the ones that their kings would be uprooted. And so here's what I wrote. I said, if Erdogan is the Antichrist, then he must conquer 3 nations. As we said before, he has already defeated a coup against himself in Turkey, likely self-engineered, effectively conquering his own country. He's already moved tanks and troops into Syria, Iraq, and Libya. This has been the status quo since 2015, roughly, 2016. Erdogan has had tanks and troops in northern Syria and Iraq for a long time in the name of fighting ISIS, which he himself created, but really he was just attacking Kurds. So here's what I said in the next paragraph. We should see in the coming years Erdogan finish the conquest of Syria. And I believe that's I know that's what just happened. Now, I'm not saying absolutely Erdogan is the Antichrist at this point. I'm not saying that Syria absolutely is one of the 3 horns, but I am watching very closely to see if 2 more horns aren't removed, and if Erdogan establishes the Islamic Caliphate, and 2 more horns are ripped up, just like what happened in Syria, then he's it. That's it. That would tell me affirmatively, 100%, this is the little horn of Daniel. Erdogan is very pompous, etc. And I think his son is even more pompous, which we're going to talk about in the next video. But here's what happened if you aren't familiar. There's been a Syrian civil war ongoing since 2013, roughly. And the Arab Spring, I think even 2011 is when it really started. Syria has been... the battle's been over Syria for geopolitical purposes. Syria itself doesn't necessarily have a ton of resources. It's not for that. It's basically a geographical location. Turkey wants it because they have to have Syria to rebuild the Islamic Caliphate. And this is President Erdogan's stated dream. He wants to revive the Ottoman Empire, the Islamic Caliphate. That's what he said his life goal is. He has to have Syria to do that. He's in NATO. NATO is allied with the West. The United States wants Syria given to Erdogan because they want it taken away from Iran and Russia. They wanted it taken away. because Syria has been a major ally to Iran and allowed Iran to smuggle weapons to Hezbollah, to put pressure on Israel, etc., etc. There's a whole Assad, the former president of Syria, was a very strong ally of Iran and Russia. So what's happened now is, out of nowhere, this terrorist group named HTS for short. Let me see if I've got the actual name. It's Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which we abbreviate as HTS, led by a guy named al-jawlani. Okay, al-jawlani. Now, this is a al-Qaeda offshoot. Basically, it was a combination. It's a group that formed out of a combo of al-Qaeda and ISIS. And al-Qaeda stepped away because this group was more radical than al-Qaeda, essentially. And they came out of nowhere with very strong training, very strong funding, very strong weaponry, and just boom, blew through Aleppo in the past weeks, took over Damascus, and President Assad had to flee to Russia. These terrorists, as they came into Syria, as they were fighting and taking these cities, were draping Turkish flags on their back. Okay, they're very much funded by Turkey. Just do a little Google search and you'll find out that they're very strongly backed by Turkey, which means backed by Erdogan. In other words, there is absolutely no doubt that what just happened is the president of Turkey just ripped out the president of Syria by his roots, and he's fled to Russia. To rip him out by his roots means that he's going to be destroying his support nobility. You know, every leader of a country rules because they have a certain loyal nobility under them that manages their army, their finances, etc. You have to have this nobility as a leader or you don't have power. And in this case, just today, the HTS discovered and captured Assad's top general that was in charge of torturing all these guys that you've seen coming out of the prisons. So the process has begun where HTS is going to be killing all of the roots, the support structure of Assad in Syria. So there is no other way to say it. The president of, this is actually factually true, the president of Turkey has ripped the president of Syria up by the roots, and it's very possible, I think beyond possible, I think it's very probable that what you've just observed is one of the three horns of Daniel being uprooted by the roots. I think we have the beginning of the fulfillment of that prophecy. Strengthening this as to why how I was able to say it was Syria, Syria would be one of the three horns so many years ago, is because Psalm 83 is a prophetic psalm about a future attack on Israel led by Assyria, otherwise known today as Turkey. And in it, there's a list of Muslim nations that join in an alliance with Turkey to attack Israel, which, by the way, if you're paying attention, Turkey right now is calling for such an alliance of Muslim nations to attack Israel. And in that list of nations, Aram is not listed, nor is Damascus listed. Damascus typically wouldn't be. Aram would have been referenced, but that's Syria. That's the ancient name for Syria. So because Aram was not in the list, I made the assumption that they are not in the list as a separate nation because they were strongly already part of Assyria again, allied with Assyria that strongly. So that's why I made that prediction. Babylon, interestingly, is also not in the list. Now I know that God has identified the United States and the West as secret Babel, or the Babylon of today. But regardless, in this list, it would have referred to Iraq. It wouldn't have referred to secret Babel. It would have referred to the actual geographical Babel in Psalm 83. And it's not in the list, which makes me think that the second or third horn that will be uprooted by Turkey is the president or prime minister, I don't remember which one they have in Iraq, but of Iraq. I believe the same thing is going to happen in Iraq. I note that Turkey still has tanks and troops in northern Iraq against the Iraqi government's wishes. And all they've been doing is attacking Kurds. I note that the very first thing that Turkey did after HTS took over Damascus is they moved in a bunch more tanks and troops and went and attacked the Kurds strongly again in northern Syria, specifically Kurds that are guarding a very important prison. Last report I saw, the Kurds were begging for help because the prison that they're guarding, the Kurds, holds, I think they said 40 to 50,000 ISIS warriors, Islamic State warriors that are being held there. Erdogan wants to free them. Why? Because they work for Erdogan. They were his people, his guys. And he wants to free them to go after Iraq or some other country, but most likely Iraq. And the last report I saw, the Kurds were begging for help because 50% of them had already been killed by the Turkish shelling. So I haven't really even, I should have looked before I did this video today, but I would not be surprised to hear that that prison is captured by Turkey and the prisoners let go in the next days, if it hasn't already happened. But Turkey is making its move. Erdogan has made a strong move, and I didn't want you to miss it or understand how it potentially is connected to prophecy. And you know, when we study the Bible without bias, and we just try to look at what it says, and we let it interpret itself, we can find there's a lot it reveals in there if we just pay attention to the details. Okay, anyways, that's it for this video. I'm going to also talk a little bit about Bilal Erdogan in the next video. You guys have a great day and stay tuned.